Today is a day of possibilities. Now, why do I say that? Because we have our guest, Dr. Patsy Baynard. She's a trained nuclear scientist and energy executive. She spent her early years in a small town in rural Arkansas and completed her graduate school at the University of Arkansas and the Florida Institute of Technology. Now, most of her career was spent developing and building large utility infrastructure projects in the electric utility industry. Now, if that's not enough, she raised two sons by herself. And after they went off to college, she went on this like voyage across the country. And she was responsible for some of the largest and most complex projects in the industry to meet our nation's growing energy needs. So we're going to find out today how we can live more in the energy of our legacy by learning more about Dr. Patsy Baynard. And Patsy Baynard, it is such a joy to have you. And I mean that very, very seriously. How are you today?
Great. It's good to talk to you, Jody.
I'll tell you, it's good to be talked to by you. Well, I have some questions for you. And of course, I've got to know our big question. How are you living in the energy of your legacy now?
Um, it is the best years of my life. You know, most people my age are retired and enjoying grandchildren and vacationing. And I don't have grandchildren, and I don't have anyone to vacation with. So, and I have a passion for the work I do. So that's what I'm doing.
That is true. And you know, it's very interesting because I experience you as somebody looking at life as a possibility, not as a problem. If you
Right.
always had that attitude in life, because you've really had a lot of obstacles. I mean, you worked in this male-dominated industry, raised kids by yourself, and yet you have this incredibly positive outlook.
Yes. And part of that comes from my faith. And part of it comes from my grandfather, who always said, you can always do and be whatever you want. And so you need to understand that. And so I've taken the challenges I faced in life and put them in perspective and moved on in my life. Not, not to say in the moment I was not sometimes in crisis, but when you step back away from it and look at that, it's really helped me to grow and be the person I am today, and to give me the strength and ability that I have to do the things I do today.
What do you think was your biggest challenge, if you can even name one, or just a biggest challenge? You've had so many, I know.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge I had, um, I think, despite having been told that by my grandfather, I always, um, I'm always my own worst critic. And for whatever circumstance happens in life, I always look at, for what am I responsible for that in it, and what am I not? And then I've gone on this voyage of constantly learning and working on myself and studying and trying to be the very best person I can be. And so it's taken those obstacles and being able to step away from them and know what role you played and what you can do better next time. Sometimes you don't get redos, but maybe you're able to put some energy into something or someone else to make a difference.
So, what lesson, if any, did you learn from working in a male-dominated industry and really kind of having to, I hate to say fight your way, but
Yeah, is that you just have to be yourself, and you um, to not let that be a problem for you. And, I know women who've handled it in many different ways and been successful at it, but everybody has to figure out what that really means for them. I've had some who turn out to try to emulate the male behavior. And if that's not really who they are, creates a lot of stress for them. Or those who become very submissive and just kind of follow orders and do what they say. And that creates its own set of stress. So I've kind of forged into the middle of it and challenged it and tried to solve those problems when they exist or limitations as they existed. And for me, at least, that's the thing that has made the difference.
Wow. And I'm just curious, how has that affected your children and how you raised your kids, if it has?
Well, they're both boys, and they had a lot of contact with their father and their father's family, and so they see and a lot of their family, their friends' family and other extended family, and they've been able to, they are their own own young men. They're both very independent, have their own mind, and they're able to challenge me, and I'm not threatened. And plus, um, the most wonderful thing is my older son has typically had female bosses. And when he's had female bosses, it's always worked really well. And, not to say he's had a lot of problems with male bosses, but he could relate to them and understand and know how to interact and deal with them better as a result of it.
Yeah, so in a way, you have really kind of changed this legacy by being a woman, by forging this kind of path. And it's kind of interesting to me that we were talking before we got on camera, and you were talking about, because I told you that when I hear the word nuclear scientist, I'm like, whoa, that's like, wow, very impressive. And in the past, frankly, I'd be a bit intimidated. And would you share your response? I thought it was very insightful.
Well, we all have our own talents and interests. And what it really is about is really pursuing those. And not that I didn't have other talents and interests besides working in the nuclear field, but I was challenged by the complexity and difficulty of that science and the contribution that it could play to the world in terms of the energy picture. And I wanted to be a part of that. And so um, everybody has that in their life, the thing that they gravitate to or have a passion for. And I've seen it in my life and other people's lives that if you have a passion for something, whether it's being an elementary school teacher, um, being a counselor, being a podcaster and strategist like you are. I have a daughter-in-law who's a fashion designer, which was always something I always wanted to do, and other professions. And she's really wonderful at it and so energized and excited about what she does. And so it's really do what you have a passion for doing it. And those things that you have an interest in and have a passion for, that'll carry you a long way in life, not only toward your happiness, but your success financially.
And finding that, and what you said really, really resonated with me, because it's like you say, it's whatever in life just draws you. And I know that for a long time in my life, I was scared. I was scared to be seen. I didn't know what I liked. I didn't know my passion. Not at all. Not until probably maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It took me a while.
Well, I think we have different roles as we go throughout our life. We're a child and we're growing up and, we're appendages of our families then we go out into the world. And it takes a while sometimes for people to figure out who they are, what they are, or they get married and have families and raise children. And, rarely do they, very often they don't get to pursue their professional interest at the same level, or they change their idea about as they mature in life. They have other things they're doing. Like for the moment, I'm no longer working directly in capital infrastructure. And I have some other interests, and that interest really has to do with exploring new energy sources for the world, for our nation. But also that other interest is pouring back things I've learned and studied and guiding and mentoring young people, or people even advanced in their careers, that they may have challenges that limits them in their ability to go to the next level, whether it's technically or personally. And to really, they maybe didn't have a grandfather who said, hey, look, you can do and be whatever you want to be. And so they don't have that. And so I'm working with people to guide and mentor them, in addition to doing consulting in the field, which I have an expertise in.
So you are guiding and mentoring, but not necessarily only people that are in your field, is what I'm understanding. Is that
That's
correct?
correct. That's
So
correct.
would you like, that's what I find very interesting, because that's a real break from what my idea is of a very scientific field, infrastructure, politics, this left brain and this and this. And then you're like, oh, you're on the other part. And isn't this interesting? And how do you bring both parts of your brain together like that?
I don't know. I think it's something I've perhaps developed over my career. I mean, I've always had the very science-oriented and highly technical and complex. And I've always had the how do you deal with people and get through things done through people, and how do you motivate people, and how do you study and learn from other people. And then when I moved to Houston a few years ago, I started this course in eidetic psychology. And I did it just for my own self-improvement initially. And then I thought, well, there's some tools here I can use in helping develop other people through leadership, and use these tools, and where what is keeping people from being all they can be. And so that drove me to want to do this.
So if I'm understanding right, it's kind of more balancing out both kind of sides of your brain, maybe? Am
Yes.
I understanding that right? I mean, because it just always amazes me, because you're in these fields, to me, in my mind, that would be so different from one another. And yet you've melded them together, which I think is very interesting.
Well, even in the business world, even in my field, when I was very young, starting out in the energy industry, I had a lot of people who guided and mentored me, because first of all, I was a female, and I needed a lot of guidance, because I wasn't accustomed to those environments. And and my grandfather was a merchant, and my mother worked in a manufacturing facility when I was growing up, and then later was an accountant. And so I didn't really learn those things at home. And so the business world was kind of foreign to me. So I went and got a master's in business administration, because I really wanted to learn, because there's all this business stuff and interacting in the business world and understanding the finances. So I did that. So when I've had those areas that I felt like I was really lacking, I went out and did something about it. Whether it's read a book, took a course, uh, participated in a mentoring group, participate in a special interest group of some sort of thing, doing volunteer work, working on campaigns, doing public policy work, um, working on things in the community. So I've always been pretty active in a lot of different things. And plus raising children, you learn a lot. You learn a lot about yourself raising children.
Oh boy, do you ever.
And you learn more about yourself than anything else, because what works for one child doesn't work for the other. And then I always taught my children to, you know, um, to challenge me, and to, if I did something they didn't like, to really tell me about it, because I wanted, um, really special and interactive relationship with my children. And I wanted them to grow and be independent and be their own person.
That's so interesting that you do that, because I actually met with my children when they were younger, and I asked them, I said, okay, mom wants to improve. What do you see in me that can improve as a mom? And they would tell me, and the feedback was very important. It was really good, because it's how I'm perceived, not what my motives were. And if you could just wave a wand about self-care, what would you like to see for yourself?
Well, in terms of self-care, the whole issue of setting boundaries, about what am I willing to spend time on and what I'm not willing to spend time on, and what's going to provide the enrichment of my life today and as I go forward, and focus on those relationships.
Is there a quote that means something to you, or words that motivate you feel? But I know that you're doing something else with energy. Would you like to share that?
Yeah. I'm an advisor to a group called the um, Energy for the Common Good, and they're very involved in trying to promote and do the groundwork for the development of nuclear fusion.
What type of people would you be interested in this grassroots effort? What kind of background? Or I didn't know how
Yeah,
eclectic you
yeah,
want, or
yeah. Well, it's everybody you can think of. When you start one of these grassroots efforts, you start teaching kids in kindergarten, in elementary school and high school, and you have to have people to put programs and um, educational materials to develop, people who will canvass, environmental scientists who will look at the land that needs to go into it, people who specialize in real estate to look at the real estate trade-offs. It's people who are starting out in the engineering field. Where are they going to put their passions, and what energy, what discipline are they going to get involved in? And in the past, it's varied all over the place. The last few years, people have focused their time, engineers have focused their time and energy on kind of the sexy things that have been the advancing artificial intelligence or high tech. And as we're seeing, the energy business is becoming more and more high tech, and hopefully a little sexier, and so that will attract more talent. But yeah, so it's kind of it's a holistic approach at a local level to get buy-in. And so you don't have these big companies come in and say, okay, we're going to build a power plant here, we're going to do this, and this. It's the communities really work together to figure out what they want in their community, and how best to implement it, and how best to develop the human resource side in terms of not only acceptance, but people to work in these industries. Because in these industries, they have people from every socioeconomic level, every educational level. There are jobs for lots of people. And so they don't have to move someplace else. They can live at their grandfather's house that they spent all this time with as a child, and they can live around their families or whatever. And it's also one of the things we're looking at is existing brownfield sites that are no longer useful for what they once were, as a reclamation of those sites, a regaining of the tax base by building new infrastructure, and to foster community efforts into building this industry that's going to be really vital for the next several hundred years. It is the next big thing in energy.
And what I'm also hearing is that people at this effort do not have to have all these scientists and experts in the area. You also, if I'm hearing right, you just want everyday people too. Am I hearing that correctly?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was involved in something like this early in my career, building a nuclear power plant, and and did a lot of this public speaking and that sort of thing, and working in communities. And there are lots of jobs, the really good jobs that you can raise a family in. Send your kids off to college if they want to, or they understand how valuable, the business trades are, get involved in a trade. I've spent my entire professional career working with tradesmen, and I have tremendous respect for them. And, they've lived very prosperous, successful lives. And, there is enough for it. There is enough for all of us. It's a matter of facilitating the discussions and interactions such that we're involved when we come into these communities to actually build communities and integrate into them and look at what's in the best place, what's in the best interest of the community, the regional area, the state. And that's what we hope to bring to bear.
Fabulous. And we will have information for everyone. And also, you don't have to be employed in order to be on the grassroots group, guys. You can be in your refirement, you're not retirement, I call it refirement. Thank you for helping us all learn how to live in the energy of our legacy now and not later. And you will have to come back because all these questions come to my mind about you. Thank you so very much for being a part of all this.
Thank you, Jody.